Welcome to 28 and Searching. I'm your host Samantha, and today I have Rick Anderson on with me. Thanks, Rick, for coming on my show.
No worries.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you currently residing? How old are you? How long have you been in your industry? That sort of thing.
My name, I live in Port Macquarie, New South Wales, in Australia. I've had a business here for 17 years, scuba diving business. I've been in the scuba diving industry for 20 years this year,
Wow.
which I sort of only realised the other day. So I've been a professional diver for 20 years. I've been scuba diving for about 27 years,
Okay.
all up, and pretty much spent most of my life in the water. I'm 46 years old at the moment,
Okay.
so better than half my life underwater.
Okay. And have you lived in, I'm assuming you've lived near the water. You've lived in Australia or near some sort of body of water for most of your life.
Yeah, I find pretty much most of my life. I think I moved to the coast from Sydney, out of Sydney to the coast when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I've been in the water pretty much ever since.
Okay, very cool. So, what exactly is your job title and what does it mean you do? If you had to explain it to somebody who'd never heard of it before.
Okay, I'm a scuba diving instructor, but that encompasses a number of things. I can be a guide because one of the processes you go through is to be a dive master, which means you're a guide, so you can show people around underwater uh, and help other instructors with work. But as a dive instructor, predominantly I'm teaching people to scuba dive, to free dive, to snorkel, all of these things that involve your body going underwater.
Okay. And so because there are quite a few different types of underwater diving, right? So you can do all the different types.
I can do all different types. Not all instructors can. Many stick to one type of training because they're comfortable in that area. But I've spent a lot of time scuba diving, and just for a change, you might go for a normal free dive where you just put a mask and a snorkel on and swim out and just swim around with the fish. And sometimes you might want to go out and hunt for your food and go spearfishing and chase for lobsters or fish that you want to feed your family with.
That is super cool. I didn't even consider the hunting portion of going underwater. So you also can do that sort of thing. You can do you teach people to do that, or is that something you do for fun?
I mostly do it for fun, but I do teach people when they approach me, and if they've got enough common sense about them, I'm quite happy to teach them to
I could.
spearfish.
That
You're
might be
giving them a
dangerous,
weapon.
right? Yeah, I was gonna say that could be kind of dangerous, right?
That's it. If you're giving them a weapon, you really want to know they're switched on before you get in the water.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what if people want to find you? What's the name of your company so that they can come? They can go look you up.
Well, I tried to keep things very simple, so it's Rick's Dive School.
Perfect, easy. I like it. And so, how? Besides living by the water, how did you get into scuba diving?
Uh, I As I said, I've always snorkeled or free dived or any of those sort of things. But from the youngest age, I always wanted to be a scuba diver.
Okay.
In my little book where you write stories when you're 6 years old, when you start school,
Hmm.
I wrote that when I grow up, I want to be a skin diver and hunt sharks.
Oh, that's amazing.
Now back then, all types of diving, regardless of what you were doing, was called skin diving. So I've pretty much stuck to my guns. I always wanted to do it. I just didn't have the opportunity to learn to scuba dive until I was 19 because my mother has an adamant fear of sharks and
Oh, wow.
would not let me do a scuba diving course when I was still living at home. So I had to wait till I'd finished school and go and do it off my own bat.
And how does she
But I
feel
sta
now about I mean, you're around sharks a lot.
Oh yeah, she prefers I don't tell her. She doesn't want to see photos and she just doesn't want to know what at all.
Oh, man. Okay. Fair enough.
But I did go through a process. Like I did the open water course, which is your beginner course.
Okay.
And from there I realized that this is exactly what I wanted to do. And started diving for a number of years just with friends and on charters and really getting to enjoy what I was doing.
Cool. And so how did you own your own dive school? How did that come to be to actually be, an owner?
Uh, Back at the turn of the century, which sounds like it's an awful long time ago when you say it that way, I was working on liveaboard dive boats in North Queensland,
Hmm.
and I had two. I had two kids at the time, and my wife, and she wanted to move back here where we had lived. So I decided we came back here, and I didn't want to let go of what I was doing. So I decided to set up my own business.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And so you talked about how you did one of the beginner courses. I'm assuming becoming a scuba instructor and somebody with the extent of all the different types that you do is extensive in training.
Yeah, there's a definite process to go through. You start at your open water, which is your beginner level.
Hmm.
Then you go through a number of little steps on the way to build up some experience and practice your skills and clock up a little bit of time underwater and around people and the equipment. When you you go through your open water, your advanced open water, a couple of specialties, so special areas of diving such as wreck diving, shark diving, deep diving, photography. If you can think of it, there's probably a specialty for it. And then you do a rescue course where you learn how to deal with adverse situations and problems that may arise with other divers, and also to prevent those sort of problems popping up
Sure.
for you.
Hmm.
Once you've done that, that's sort of the top of the recreational part of it. You can then step into your first, if you've got quite a few dives up, usually it's about 60 dives, so you've got a little bit of experience.
Sure.
You can move into the Dive Master course, which takes a couple of months to work your way through. The longer the Dive Master course goes for, the more experience you gain, because you're becoming a guide. You're becoming that person that thinks for everyone else that's out on a boat or in the water
Yeah.
at the time, all those novice divers. So you'll learn to deal with just about anything and everything as a dive master trainee, hopefully. That way, if you go into the workforce as a dive master, you can trust in yourself that you're capable of looking after everyone that's in your charge, and they can trust you that you should be able to help them if something goes wrong, because a lot of people are always going to be a novice diver. They only dive when they go on holidays, so that might be once or twice a year that they go for a dive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every year it's a new experience. After working a little while as a dive master, then you can look at going on to your instructor ratings, learning to teach all those skills to all those people, all those different levels of diver, and so they can gain experience. But you definitely need to know the ins and outs of just about every facet of scuba diving to move into that instructor qualification.
Okay. And so how long total to get to your type of experience level, besides obviously, the amount of time you've been doing it, but just in the training portion, how long do you think it takes to get through all those courses?
There are places around where you can get through those courses in 3 or 4 months.
Oh, wow.
It's very rushed. It's not something that I sort of endorse. I think you're better off taking a year or 2 years to go through all those courses so you actually gain the experience.
Yeah.
Rather than diving the exact same conditions with the exact same type of people every day for those periods of time. But you can knock it over in quite a short period of time.
Okay, and so I know, when people jump out of planes or, do, paragliding or, skydiving, they have to have a certain amount of hours before they're able to do, jumps by themselves. Is it kind of similar with scuba diving where you have to have a certain number of hours under your belt, or is it just passing the classes and getting the certifications?
It's not so much hours, it's actual dives.
Okay.
Because dives vary between individuals, the air consumption. Some people are heavier breathers than others.
Sure.
But you still are working on minimum dives accumulated before you can go to the next step each time.
Okay, so there is an amount of experience.
There's a minimum experience to get to each level. The more experience you get, obviously, the easier everything is.
Yes, I can imagine, and I mean, with that many people's, lives, like you said, being novice, they don't know better if something happens. It would be beneficial to take your time when getting certified for this.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And so if somebody's interested in becoming a scuba diving instructor, or even a guide for that matter, what would be kind of a good starting point or an entry-level job that they can see if this is right for them?
Quite often, if they can get work on a boat or in a resort where there's a lot of people around, quite often a resort will just have someone that's going to, especially in tropical locations,
sure,
we'll have someone that might take a group out for shallow water snorkeling. So they're getting used to having people follow them around, but everything's done on the surface. It's not done underwater. Or if they're working from a boat, they might be in a sort of a buoyed off section of reef where they can keep all the snorkelers wearing flotation devices and just they're swimming around. But you do need to see if you really like it, you do need to be working where those crowds of people are getting in the water.
Okay.
And you have to explain the safety facets of everything to them on a day-to-day basis. Gives you a very good idea of whether that's the sort of thing you want to do. If you're not a people person, you might find it a little bit difficult.
I could see that. And so, honestly, I've never been scuba diving. I've never been snorkeling, so I don't know a whole lot about the different types. Is there like a beginner type, that's maybe easier to instruct or guide versus maybe harder types?
Yep. What you're looking at, like beginner sort of snorkeling, is basically there'll be a life vest or a flotation device put on the individual.
Okay.
and they just swim around on top in relatively shallow water.
Okay.
Like they're not trying to go to the bottom. The more advanced snorkeling is generally what we call free diving. And so you're not using that flotation device. You're swimming into a little bit deeper water and diving down to the bottom. And there's a fair bit of breath control training required with that. But you're getting to the swimming down to look at the bigger fish in the deeper water on one breath. And then you come back up. That's a little bit more dangerous because you are going deeper on one breath.
Sure.
And you have a number of little dangers that can affect that, on top of being in deeper water where you've got currents and more moving water and bigger fish.
Okay. Sure.
With scuba diving, I mentioned the beginner course, which is your open water course. So that's actually a full course. But if you're in a resort or just on holiday somewhere and you want to see if you actually do like being underwater for a period of time with scuba equipment on. So you're looking at equipment that weighs like 18 kilograms when
Wow.
when you have everything on for the average person.
Yeah.
So you want to know if that's something that you want to do. So you can do what's called an introductory dive or a resort dive, which are run by most dive operations. So it's a one-off experience. You get a safety briefing, an explanation of how everything works, and starting in shallow water, you have a little bit of a play, do the couple of basic skills like getting water out of your mask and recovering your regulator, which is the mouthpiece that you're breathing off underwater, which they're pretty important because you want to keep them clear and breathing, working, so you can see and breathe what you're doing underwater. And but from that point, so you might start that in knee deep, sort of sitting on your knees in that little bit of water with your head just underwater. And then you slowly make your way down to 5 or 6 meters underwater and swim around with the fish and get a true sensation of whether you want to be there or not.
Okay. Very cool. So there's a range. They're looking for people in a range of different areas when you're talking about diving.
Yes, most definitely.
And what kind of personality traits do you think work best as a scuba diver instructor?
You need to be open-minded, very, very, very open-minded. You can't be a total stress head. If every little thing's going to bother you, you're not going to be able to handle it, because every class you're going to have people making the same mistakes they made in the previous class. It's just, those are things that just don't register in people's heads until they've practiced them a few times.
Sure.
But mostly positive, switched on, and willing to sort of make your own way. Confidence in yourself, because you're talking to people every day. Every day you're explaining how the equipment works, what you're going to do, the plan for the session, be it a course or just a charter. So you need to be able to talk to people. It is a very difficult thing if you're shy, like excessively shy, because you have to speak to people, and that can be a little bit hard. You get a mixture of languages, nationalities,
Yes.
Which can make all sorts of things difficult.
Yes.
But if you can express yourself people are going to understand or come close to understanding what you're telling them. So you just probably open-minded and sort of positive, sort of reasonably confident in yourself are probably the two main things.
Yeah, I can tell you if I was going underwater, I would absolutely want somebody who was confident in their abilities to keep me alive. Yes.
Yeah,
And so, what do you think is the one personality trait that's the worst? Like, if somebody has this, they should stay as far away from this as they can possibly get.
um, if they're scared of water, definitely.
Yeah, that would be.
if 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 that's in the back of their mind at all times, if there's someone that's very flighty or nervous, um, that individual that's sort of scared of the dark,
Sure.
because you can see underwater, but we've all got this mindset. It's ingrained into us from birth that if you go in the ocean, the monsters are going to get you.
Yeah.
And so basically, it's like walking down a dark alley in the back of some people's minds. It's like walking down that dark back alley in the middle of a city, and people get worried about that. So if they're a nervous sort of person or nervous about the water, very, very shy, you can build up away from shy, and that just takes experience on boats. I've worked with shy people before. Some have come good, some haven't.
Sure.
But you've just got, like anything, the younger you are, obviously, the more shy you tend to be. So you've just got to not be that nervous, high-strung individual, because people are out there to freak you out.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. And so, what's a part of your personality that you've struggled with where either you've had to change what you're doing or change yourself to kind of fit into this career?
Well, that's a trick question. I think probably being more tolerant. Like I worked in industry before I became a dive instructor. I did my trades in a metal industry. And so you're working with people and you become a little bit shorter fused
Yeah.
than you'd like to be, because that's industry, that's commercial industry. And probably my tolerance of people is probably the main thing that has improved with time. Like, so many people frustrate you when you first come into the industry. Those people still frustrate you, but you don't let it worry you anymore. being this deep into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and my husband worked as a welder, so I know the gruffness that can come.
That's it. That's right there. 100%.
And so if somebody's looking at doing this, if they want to be, a scuba instructor or a guide, what's kind of the different options they have? I mean, you started your own business, but you said you also worked for a place. So is there a pretty big market for this? Or is it where it's very small, it's very niche? Or what is it? What does the job market kind of look like for this?
Okay, scuba diving is still a growing industry. It did stagnate a little bit about 5-6 years ago. We had the GFC, the global financial crisis, which sort of dampened a lot of tourism-based activities.
Yes.
On the east coast of Australia, we had a series of floods over the summer months that happened over a couple of years that dampened the industry. In that regard. But scuba diving and places like the Bahamas, the Caymans, Florida, another prime diving area. They had Hurricane Irma last year. They're still rebuilding and trying to get things back up and running over there. But as an ongoing industry, it's getting bigger. It's always growing, and there's plenty of work opportunities, be it working from a dive shop where you go out on a day boat, or you're shore diving, or just doing classes, or working in the shop itself, selling dive equipment, or just on the retail side of things. Up to working on liveaboard dive boats where you'll go out for overnight, 3 days a week, 2 weeks. The range is quite open. Some of those liveaboard dive boats, you might get work as a hostie, so just doing the general bed making and kitchen duties, things like that, and you might slowly build up your dive experience while you're working on the boat. That's invaluable experience. I work with many people, many girls that were doing that work to work up to their instructor ratings. They were spending the time at sea. They were getting to see a variety of people and gaining that extra experience. Plus, they were getting to dive once they'd finished their workload. They were getting to dive. They were gaining experience. It was just a win-win situation.
Yeah. And so that's kind of a good point. So if somebody wants to do this and maybe they're not at that experience level to open their own shop, you're saying that they can go work at some of these places, so either on the boats or maybe around a resort in the area of doing this, or at an actual shop, and kind of gain the experience of the business as well as getting their experience built up.
Yeah, definitely. There's many opportunities. Obviously, the bigger opportunities are in tropical locations.
Sure.
Because there's always going to be a bigger turnaround with tourism. Places where it gets cooler, that sort of runs a little bit more seasonally. If you're in quite cold weather, you do have your divers that are diving year round, that are quite happy. They're keen to dive. They just want to get underwater and blow bubbles and see what's going on, see what animals they can play with, or what they can take photos of, or any of those sort of things. But there is a great capacity within the industry to come in many different facets.
Okay. And so if people, would it be almost a qualifier for them to want or need to travel? Because it sounds like, there might be specific locations, or maybe they might need to go to different places to get work in this industry.
I personally think one of the greatest things you can do to sort of get the most out of this industry is to want to be free and easy.
Okay.
Explore the world. Starting out, I think it's a much easier industry if you're single to get started, to get through the first little facet of it.
Sure.
Because there are time restrictions. If you've got a young family, you're going to find it a little bit time restrictive, because you're going to do a lot of this stuff. If you're on a liveaboard dive boat, you're gone for a couple of days to a couple of weeks, so you might not be seeing your family.
Okay.
If you're working from a shop, they're usually early starts, pretty much normal finish times. Peak seasons, your time is much longer. You'll be running into the night, filling bottles and servicing gear and getting everything ready for the next day when it's busy. It truly is a lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah.
it is exactly what it can be. Let me rephrase that. It can be exactly what the pictures depict. Kicking back on an island, having a beer, and just enjoying life. But there is a lot of work to get to that point.
So you got to earn it.
You've got to earn it. You can't shy away. No one's going to hand you anything in this industry. So you have to be willing to chase what you want. And if you want to blow bubbles, meet different people, be in the ocean, encounter wildlife that most people will never see, will never understand, you'll find throughout the diving industry those that are very committed to the diving, those that just have a serious passion for diving, and find it difficult to talk. Well, don't find it difficult to talk to people, but find it difficult for people to understand why they're saying what they're saying and talking with such passion about the animals that they've just been swimming with, or the fact that they just swam around and saw nothing through the dive. I went because we were having this interview today.
Yeah.
I went for a muck around dive with an old friend. We were using underwater scooters, which basically just propel you along like a torpedo that you would have seen in movies.
That's cool.
And we've dived it a million times. It's just one of those spots, and we've just been in there. We found a about 150, 160-year-old bottle.
Wow.
On the bottom.
Wow.
Right. And we both got excited. Like, we've found things before. We found shipwrecks. We've done all this. Been in this spot a million times. But we both could express our excitement underwater. You can't talk underwater. And we both buzzed, and we both came out talking the exact same thing about how special it was to find something like that. There's nothing. It's not a particularly exciting dive site. It was just somewhere where we thought, well, we'll get in here, we'll have a quick run, we'll get wet. So you do have, if you're passionate about about being in the water, it's a great job to have.
Okay. And so what would you say are, maybe some of the drawbacks of doing it?
The drawbacks can be bad weather. So you might have jobs booked in, and the weather turns horrible and you can't do those jobs. So you might watch a week's worth of money walk away.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's probably the thing that hurts me the most.
Oh, yeah. Well, nothing you can do, right?
There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. If the weather comes up when you've got bookings, sometimes you can postpone it, but sometimes those people are on holidays. So that's the opportunity that they have to dive, and they and spend their money with you, and you can't take them. So it's just bye-bye. That's probably the biggest drawback. Like any job, there's long hours, there's lots of work. You're always chasing work.
Yeah.
It's like any job in the overall thing. There's always stuff to service and maintain, equipment to wash, air bottles to fill. It's just time-consuming stuff. And when I started this business, I had two young boys, like both under the age of 5.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I started the business for myself rather than working for someone else was so I could pick the hours that I wanted to work.
Yeah.
And spend time with my family while they were growing up. So that's an advantage. To the disadvantage was, if you are in the industry and you're working for yourself, you can pick the what you're going to do work-wise, so you can spend the time with your family.
And so what has been the worst day of your career so far?
um, it's no real worst day. Probably.
Nothing
I
crazy happened? I would assume that there was some life-changing, horrible
Um,
instance that's occurred.
yeah, that's a hard one. I think it's the word worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Probably a scary day in recent history. I was diving with a very close friend, and we happened to swim through it. We were doing a shark dive, which was all well and good. Nothing scary in that. But we went through a point where we swam through some dirty water, and she sort of decided something was wrong, and she stopped and hid in under a rock or under a overhang in that dirty water. I swam a couple of meters, but we were just in a section of dirty water where the visibility was very, very poor. I swam a couple of meters, felt something go past my leg, and I've turned to see if she was still there, and she wasn't there. And I've sort of, that just didn't make sense because she was never not right there
Yeah.
on any dive that I've ever done, regardless of conditions, visibility, whatever. And all the alarm bells had gone off in my head just before that moment, like just before I felt whatever went past my leg. Mm-hmm. I've turned around, I've backtracked, but she was in dirty water and there was a bit of whitewash where there was waves breaking on the top of because it was next to a rock island and there was waves breaking on the top. So there was a lot of bubbly water. If you imagine your champagne or a bottle of soft drink or something shaken up.
Okay.
So I couldn't quite see. So I've backtracked, couldn't see her. Alarm bells are still going off. I've done a bit of a search, gave up searching on the bottom, came to the surface, still no sign of her. I've covered all the ground back and forth around the end of this island and couldn't see her. And I've climbed up on the rock, mm-hmm. and I'm looking, and this was all over a 5-minute period. And I've come up on the rock, still no sign of it, and then finally she pops up away from where we were. She decided it's safe to move and swam off and tried to navigate back to where we'd come from. My alarm bells are still going off, and I'm yelling at her to come back, get over near the reef. We regrouped, sorted all that out, went and did our dive with the sharks that we wanted to dive with, which are grey nurse sharks, which are big sharks. They're proper sharks, but they're docile animals. Mm-hmm. We've finished our dive. We've gone back in. We got out off the beach. We're standing there pulling our gear apart, and I see a seal jump out of the water. Then the seal jumps back out of the water, right where my friend had surfaced.
Oh.
The next time the seal came out of the water, a great white shark had it in its mouth.
Oh.
And we watched it devour the seal right where she had surfaced, where we'd been diving. That's probably the scariest dive I've had recently because because that seal is exactly what I thought had happened to my friend.
Oh my goodness. That
very, very rare occurrence, but
yeah.
We just happened to be in a spot where things went a little bit funny. We did everything went all right after that, but then we watched what was going on, and obviously women's intuition made a hide under the rock. And with my alarm bells going off just after she disappeared, I know something swam past my leg, so it's a good chance it was the great white. And then we watch it eat this seal on the surface.
That's crazy.
As we get out of the water. So that's probably the worst one I've had in the last 15, 16 years, I reckon.
So what I hear is that's where your calm and your ability to listen to intuition come in handy in this industry.
Oh yeah, believe in your sixth sense. Be superstitious.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there for a reason.
It's better to be to listen to it than not.
Oh yeah, 100%. If you ignore your your sixth sense, that alarm bell ringing in the back of your head,
Mm-hmm.
going, you should not be here. Go home.
Yeah.
Pack up and go home. You have to do that. I've come down because I have had things sort of not well, they haven't quite gone to plan,
Sure.
but where they haven't gone to plan, I've ignored things that were going wrong beforehand.
Mm.
So now it's a two strike rule. If two things go wrong before I get in the water, I'm not risking the third one.
Yeah.
So that can be anything from forgetting a dive mask for a customer, or forgetting a weight belt, or one of the dive bottles accidentally being knocked so the air valve's on and it's empty or low on air when you get to the dive site, or a mast strap breaks when you're getting ready, or a fin strap breaks. Little things like that, they're just alarm bells.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't trust them, that third thing might be really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand not wanting to risk it. That I mean, and I'm sure experience has helped to put those alarms in in your subconscious. It's telling you to stop for a second, give it a break.
Definitely. Like I've I have swum with all the big sharks, all the supposedly big and scary sharks, and sometimes it has been a little bit scary. Mostly the first time you see something like a great white underwater, or a tiger shark, or a bull shark. You see them underwater for the first time. Yeah, it gives you that little heart rush.
Yeah.
But the next time they're around, you actually pick up on the sensation that you had when they were there. So even before you see them, you know they're there, and you're switched on, and you see when they come in. So everything's hunky dory. Like the shark comes in, it has a look at you, you have a look at it, and they swim off and do the sharky thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Everything under the sea is curious. Whether it's people being under the sea curious about what fish are doing, or it's the animals under the sea curious about what's this thing making all this noise, blowing bubbles under. Being under the sea is just a totally curious experience.
Okay. And so we've taken the worst, something super scary. What about the opposite? So what's been the best day or moment or thing that's happened in your career so far?
All right. The best I can do. That's easy. Back when I was working on liveaboard dive boats, I was in North Queensland diving on the Yongala shipwreck, which is the number 6 best shipwreck in the world. Not so much that it's a thrilling, exciting ship, but it has such a large array of fish life on it, from millions of tiny fish to just big fish.
Sure.
Very big fish. And I was doing a particular dive, and what we used to do was one instructor would lead the group down, especially on our last dive of the trip. These were 3-day liveaboard dive trips, and that's usually where we finished our dives on this wreck. And one instructor would go down and lead them along, and then he'd come up and start sorting things out while everyone was just enjoying the life on the reef. And whoever was the other instructor would usually come down and just make sure they all got out of the water, untie all the lines that used to be tied to the wreck. Now there's mooring lines there, but used to be tied to the wreck, so you'd have to wait. But I did this dive, and we'd seen a humpback whale playing near all the liverboards.
Wow.
Between the two dives, and you don't want divers going too close to it, because if the whale panics, it might take off in a hurry, and it's a lot of weight behind their tail when they start moving. They're a big animal.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put the fear into everyone, and it's telling them, if you see it, stay well clear. Thinking, oh yeah, all right, we're good. We're not going to see it. No way. The other instructor, I'm past the other instructor on the way down. He gives me a signal that the humpback's off in the distance. And I've gone, all right, well, fair enough, I missed it. I get to the opposite end of the shipwreck, and here's 16 heads, all hiding. Now, the shipwreck's on its side, so they're basically laying on the deck of the wreck,
mm-hmm.
peering over the edge. And I'm 16 heads, and they're all tight together, and I'm thinking, great, we're going to finish this dive with a big tiger shark, which was pretty common on that particular site. And I thought, it's going to be close, because they're all freaking out. And I'm looking, and it's like, yeah, they'll be right. I turn around. Here's this juvenile humpback male.
Oh, no.
All 14 metres of him, just hanging in the water behind me.
Oh,
he's hanging upside down. And he's just hanging there. And we're drifting along in the current. And it's like, this is terrific. How good's this? And what happens with a whale is they sort of create their own little vortex, their own little atmosphere. So there's the current's drifting along the wreck. And somehow I end up between this whale's pectoral fins. So he's sort of drawn me in with his own little eddy or vortex, whatever you want to call it. And I'm like, this is cool. Like, I'm arms, not even a full arm's length off his chest, just laying between his pectoral fins. Now, this is 14 metres of animal.
Yeah.
And I could hear this funny noise. As I'm breathing out, my bubbles are going up his belly, up his chest and up his belly, and he was giggling.
Oh, my gosh.
He was giggling with the sensation, and I'm like, no way. And I'm there, and I'm going, this is too good. And I had to do it. I've reached out, and I just started patting him on the chest like you would with a dog laying on its back.
Oh, my gosh.
Giggling and carrying on. He was loving it, absolutely loving it. This went on for about a good 10 minutes. And at this stage, I'm sort of realised that all the novice divers that were still hiding, it was time for them to go up. So I've turned around and I've given them all the up signals. So they've all swum up the other end of the wreck to surface. And I'm still drifting along with this humpback. And I sort of got to a point where I was about 100 metres past the end of the wreck. Now, this shipwreck's in the middle of nowhere. There's no land. The closest land's like 30 kilometres away.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm drifting on, and I'm like, all right, I've got to go. This is too good, but I've got to go. So I give him one last pat, and I've swum up and started swimming back up the length of the wreck to where the ropes were tied off. Checked above me, and the last of the divers was getting out of the water, so I start untying the ropes. As I'm doing it, all the fish disappear. And I'm like, now this is a wreck that is covered in fish. You generally got to push them out of the way so you can see where you're going.
Okay, so it's odd. Okay.
And they've all disappeared, and I'm back to all right, the tiger shark thing is happening now. No, the whale's come within 10 metres of me, swimming as fast as he could, straight past me, and then breached behind where the boat was on the surface.
Gosh.
So I've watched him breach from underwater. He's come back down, and then he's just swum off. I've finished untying, did what I had to do, and surfaced. And they're all going, the skipper's going, oh, you missed the best breach straight behind the boat. And I'm going, no, I didn't. I saw it all.
Oh
So
my
that
gosh.
is my best dive experience ever. Now I have swum with whales since, but I've never been sort of married up, like cuddled up by one as such. Since then, I've had whales come past me. I've had them have a look at me, but that far outweighs any dive that I've ever done.
That is very cool. That is spectacular. I love that. That's amazing. That's a pretty hard best day to beat, for being
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. I've tried. I can't.
And this is a silly question, slightly off topic, but so I live in Washington State. I don't know if you've ever been here.
No, I haven't.
But so the Pacific Northwest has orcas. So I didn't know if
Yep.
is that something that like people dive here? Like I've just never heard because we have really bad weather. We have really crappy weather here. It rains most of the year. So it's not like good, but I didn't know if you knew like do people dive here?
There are people are starting to realise that they can dive with orcas.
Mm.
There are places where they are diving with them. Alaska is probably the main place.
Okay.
Norway is the other spot that they're doing it a fair bit. But it's a little bit difficult. There's a high degree of experience needed. Obviously, the water's
Oh yeah.
colder
Yeah.
where they tend to be. And when you talk about orcas, they are the top of the food chain. They are the apex predator,
Yes.
above sharks, above anything
Killer
else.
whales.
Killer whales. It's a bad terminology, but
Yeah.
it's not something that I'd like to say.
I
But
just
the
didn't know
orcas,
if that was a
they
thing.
are the top of. Yeah, it is becoming it's something I desperately want to do. I think for a big dolphin, it'd be just so awesome to swim with them. They are very, very intelligent animals. But there are places it's just a matter of sort of finding where people are doing it. I know the two main places currently are Alaska and Norway, where they're swimming with them.
So when
But
you're talking about Alaska and Norway, you said that since it's colder, so you have to have more experience to be in colder climates to do dives?
it's a different type of diving. You're wearing
Okay.
instead of wearing a wetsuit, you're wearing what's called a dry suit, which there's extra training required with that. It's much more cumbersome. It's like wearing a pair of coveralls
Okay.
underwater, like watertight coveralls with boots built into them.
Okay.
A bit like all over waders, if you imagine a pair of fishing waders
Sure. Yep.
that they wear, rubber pants.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. So there is that added into the equation, but because they are the apex predator, and they are very, very big, it's sort of that's where the experience
Comes
level needs to be. You need to be familiar with diving with top predators, because they can change their attitude in a heartbeat.
Sure.
Where everything's hunky dory, and then you do something that is dumb or aggressive to them, and they take a dislike to that, and that's where accidents happen.
Yeah. So like
So
big cats.
that yeah, any predator, any big predator, you need to be aware of how to deal with animals. Like they all look peaceful and nice while they are peaceful and nice and happy, but if you do the wrong thing, like anything, like
Sure.
people, you do the wrong thing to a person, they're going to become aggressive.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a, if you understand animals, especially predatory animals,
Yeah.
it just makes it so much easier. It means you can get a bit closer to that particular animal. Sharks are terrific. You can swim with just about or you can swim with all the sharks. You just got to be able to read their mannerisms. They tell you when they're not happy.
Sure.
They let it out. Orcas, if they're not happy, it's going to happen really quick.
Yeah.
There was a video floating around this week of two kids swimming somewhere, and two orcas go past the two young boys in a canal or a lake or something with no interest in them. They it's like that old cartoon of the skier crashing into the tree and the skis going in two different directions.
Yeah.
The orcas are approaching these two boys in the water, and they both go either side and keep going and back out to sea. No interest in causing any harm whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're all wild animals, like anything in the wild. Like there's more wild animals in the ocean than there are left on land.
Yeah.
Because civilization's just crowded many of the wild animals out. So it's much less than what we'd see, where the ocean, there's still many predators, and a lot of them have never seen a person before, which can be funny. I've had a number of bull sharks, which are supposedly big and scary, but bull sharks are a shark that go upriver to have their pups, and then they sit there, and they might get, if there's not been a lot of rain, they might get trapped up in a swimming hole above rapids until there is a lot of rain, and then they've had their pups and they come out. But the thing with a shark living in a river, it's going to get very boring when all they're eating is turtles and catfish.
Yes.
So when they do come out, they get very curious and want to have a good look at anything and everything. And we had a little bit of a rain at the end of last year, and I was doing a couple of boat cleaning jobs on some yachts. And as I'm cleaning away, you're knocking barnacles off and making a lot of commotion underwater. We'd had this bit of rain. There was a lot of metre-long bull sharks swimming around. And they'd come up and they'd be swimming over the top of you and bumping into you just to see what you were, because you weren't a turtle and you weren't a catfish. Let's have a look. So curiosity was getting the better of them.
Yeah.
I probably had a dozen little bull sharks over a 2-week period, which was quite funny.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I could imagine. I mean, it would be, for like me imagining it, it would be surreal almost, of being bothered constantly by something that's supposed to be this big bad predator.
Yeah. It was purely like in the situation, they just wanted to see what was going on. Why was I making all that noise? Why was I making such a mess in the water with all the barnacles? Plus, you got all the little fish eating the barnacles and other growth that you're knocking off the bottom of the boat as you're cleaning it.
So you're the star of the ocean at that point.
Yeah.
And so, do you currently have any type of expansion plans for your business, or anything coming up that's exciting that you're looking forward to?
I'm planning on later this year selling up and moving back to the tropics and setting myself back up on a liveaboard dive boat. So doing the same thing, but being back on a boat that I work on and spend more time at sea. My kids have grown up, so it's time to chase the next adventure. So I'm going to buy a big boat and do what I do best: take people diving.
Very exciting. And so we've kind of gone over what it means to be a scuba diving instructor and guide. I just have a few more questions for you.
Yep.
What is the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Don't be precious.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm sorry?
Does that make sense? Does that?
Kind of, but go ahead and explain it to me.
You can't let little things bother you. Just keep plowing through. Do what you got to do. Believe in what you think is right. If it's wrong, well, just believe in what you did.
Yeah? Okay. Good.
Yeah.
And then what is one piece of advice you would give someone who's currently feeling like they're not in the right career path, or maybe they're feeling almost down on where they're at in their work life?
Main piece of advice I would give is you should live life. Don't live to work. It's just not worth doing.
Yeah.
If you're not happy in what you're doing, if there's something that you're passionate about or something that you want to try it. Don't be scared. Jump, take that leap. There's always going to be a job.
Yeah.
If you're not happy in the job that you're doing, you're not living life. You're just going through a grind that is it's going to kill you. It's not worth doing just working for the sake of working because you feel like I'm secure and safe now. When I was 28, I rented my house out and I moved to North Queensland. I'd been a metal worker for over 8 years at that point, and I completely changed my career, my occupation. That was a safe job. It was guaranteed work every day, and I went to North Queensland. I had no job lined up. I had a young family, and I just took that leap of faith, and it's paid off for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Well, I thank you so much for coming on and spending this time with me and telling me about your career, and I look forward to hearing about your adventures in the big boat and the next best thing for you.
Awesome. It's been great chatting.
If you like this episode or you're looking to change your career, go to 28andsearching.com or become a patron to get exclusive content sent directly to you. See you next week.